it seems like there are these two almost opposite forces of masculinity and femininity that play out in our lives, both in society and it's spoken a lot about in non-duality and awakening. Like there's the masculine movement of awakening and the feminine movement of awakening. And although this can be quite useful, I think overall it's just kind of nonsense, really. I'm coming to the conclusion that it's almost entirely mind-created, which is informed by a deep historic legacy of gender binary conditioning, essentially. Now, that isn't to say it's not useful. It can be really useful to have these different ways of identifying types of movement within us. But the idea that a certain type of way of being or a certain energetic movement is purely masculine and a different type, an apparently opposing type, is entirely feminine. Well, I just don't think there's any grounding to that. So I'll give a quick example as to why. In the West, when we talk about the masculine movement of awakening, we're often talking about the wise cutting through, kind of slicing, wisdom-based, quite forceful, single-pointed inquiry, insight, vipassana, all of these things that are typically associated with masculine identity in the West, actually, or historic masculine identity. So we feel like the masculine movement of awakening is a strong cutting through, seeing, insight movement. And on the other hand, the feminine movement of awakening is more forgiving, compassionate, gentler, opening, accepting, boundless, heart-based. So that's the kind of idea that we have. And then we explore, apparently, these different movements in our experience and often notice how we can lean more towards the open-hearted, the softer, the more forgiving, or the more strident, the more direct, the more focused. Okay, so it seems apparent, doesn't it? Masculine and feminine. Yet in India and in Tibet, typically in the Buddha Dharma teachings, those roles are entirely reversed, like completely reversed. Whereas the masculine energy, the masculine movement is compassion. It is one of open-hearted compassion and connectedness. And the feminine energy is the movement of wisdom, that clear seeing clarity that cuts through delusion. So entirely the opposite. So what's the importance of that? Well, I think it just goes to show that these roles, these gender roles that we assign not just to ourselves in modern life, but that seem to be assigned to mysterious movements in the spiritual life, they're entirely arbitrary, really. They are useful in the degree to which they can help us to envision, embody, and open up to certain types of movement, but they are not inherently anything. They're definitely not inherently masculine or inherently feminine. What I really like about the Tibetan schools of Buddhism is that they have these masculine deities and these feminine deities, and those are completely informed by societal norms in Tibet and in India and in China at the times. They're completely informed by those. But still, they recognize that they are interconnected, so deeply interconnected that they cannot be pulled apart. So you get this experience of what they would call yab-yum. So yab-yum is the total interconnected, interpenetrated facets of wisdom and compassion, masculine and feminine. And they're represented often by a guru and their consort engaged in kind of like holy or divine intercourse, intertwined and interpenetrating each other. Now, although that's kind of not it, it's a really useful image to show that these ideas of masculine and feminine as something real in and of themselves are entirely flexible. And as I've shown and just described with the Western view of those gender binaries and the traditional Tibetan view of those gender binaries, they're completely arbitrary. They can switch. Well, they don't switch necessarily. They are taken up on board entirely down to the culture and the situation and the circumstance in which they have arisen. So why am I talking about this? Well, because I think it's kind of limiting, really, to think that there is something inherently masculine or inherently feminine in any aspect of the spiritual life. Really, the deep opening and freedom that we're looking towards is beyond the binary, beyond duality. We recognize that these arbitrary descriptions, they don't cut it. Truth is not two. It isn't split. It isn't divided. And within that non-dual nature, there is this dance. There is this dance of, well, I mean, it's difficult to describe phenomena, form, energy, appearance, luminosity, behaviors, openings, closings, expansions and contractions, these apparent opposites that really never find any solid ground. The expansion is never separate from the contraction. The masculine is never separate from the feminine. So they're not opposing in any way. In fact, if anything, they are just useful ways to explore the full spectrum of living. And if we're going to be awake, and if we're going to be free, we need to be free from dualistic ways of seeing the world. And there's no more dualistic way of seeing the world than male and female. Now, it might sound a little hypocritical, mainly because of the way that I look and the way that I express. I talk about being non-binary, but I also sometimes look very mask. And also, I have these guru and deity figures in my life that are part of my practice. So here's one. I'll try and get them. This is the Guru Padmasambhava, like inherently masculine in their representation. He brought the Dharma to Tibet. I could talk about the Guru Padmasambhava for a long time. So it seems like, well, there's a strong expression of the masculine, and yet he's seen as the guru of change and infinite compassion. And his consort, the dancing wisdom darkini Vajrayogini, who I don't have a picture of. I have a tattoo of, which I'm not going to show you, but the Darkini Vajrayogini is the wisdom Darkini who cuts through delusion at its root and dances in the enlightened play of the sky-like nature of mind. So you've got a he and a she that exist in these deep lineages, and yet to me they just seem totally interchangeable, really. Like they're not bound by something so crude as a gender binary. In fact, well, the way I feel it, not just see it, feel it in my experiences, I feel the interpenetrating nature of them both. It's where the guru points, the Darkini dances. When the guru teaches, the Darkini sings. There's no separation between the wisdom and the compassion and the wisdom. They are the same non-dual, boundless unfolding of freedom. And it's the same with regards to the teachings on form and emptiness. Maybe some people feel like these are, one is more masculine or one is more feminine. They're not two. They were never two. Form is only emptiness. Emptiness is only form. They are not separate in and of themselves. Form is empty of self-nature, and emptiness naturally forms. This is truth beyond the binary. So, yeah, I thought I'd share this because this is what's on my mind. And as someone who's been exploring this very specific gender binary that we see in modern culture, noticing, actually, this is really old. This has been around for thousands and thousands of years, this idea that things are inherently either male or female, masculine or feminine. But as has been shown, actually, that just totally depends on the time and the place that you live. Completely arbitrary. And therefore, I think often, well, kind of nonsense, really. Like, only useful to the degree that it will liberate us, really, and help us to embody these movements of enlightened, awake, open-hearted being. So if they can do that, then fantastic. But we've got to let go. We've got to let go of any idea of opposition. There is no separation for opposition to gain traction. That's just not the way things are. So we can notice these movements, but don't become too attached to the idea that it's this or that. It's male or female. This is a masculine movement of awakening, or this is a feminine movement of awakening, because in truth, the truth is beyond all of that. It is not two. It is beyond the binary.